In today's tense world, hotspots in Eastern Europe, East Asia, and the Middle East are fueling fears of a global war. As Poland's prime minister warned in late 2024, recent events show that there is a real risk of a global conflict breaking out. From Russia's invasion of Ukraine to US-China confrontations over Taiwan, and Iran's clashes with Israel and US allies, multiple crises could intersect. Please follow us and subscribe as we'll examine these flashpoints and the United States' role, its military strategy, alliances, and doctrines, to understand how the world might slide into war or, with diplomacy, avert it. Russia-Ukraine conflict. Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine starting in February 2020 remains Europe's deadliest war since World War II. It has shredded cities and cost hundreds of thousands of lives. Western nations, led by the US, have armed and funded Ukraine, while imposing stiff sanctions on Moscow. NATO has strengthened its eastern defenses. At its 2025 summit, the alliance agreed members should raise defense spending toward 5% of GDP to deter Russia. Even NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte warned that Russia could be ready to use military force against NATO within 5 years if unchecked. The risk of escalation is real. Experts caution that if NATO forces entered the fight directly, it could trigger a broader war. For example, an analysis notes that while NATO's support for Ukraine is vital, any direct involvement of NATO forces could provoke Russia and lead to a broader war. US officials are also sensitive to nuclear danger. Russia has made veiled threats about using nuclear weapons if it feels existentially threatened. In Washington, commentators have suggested offering Ukraine stronger security guarantees like a formal defensive pact as a compromise to bring Russia to the negotiating table. But for now, the front lines hold, and the US must weigh its commitments carefully under NATO's mutual defense pledge, mindful that stepping over certain lines could ignite a wider conflict. US-China tensions. Taiwan and South China Sea. In East Asia, the standoff between the US and China centers on Taiwan and disputed seas. China claims Taiwan is part of its territory and has never renounced force to achieve reunification. Beijing's military has been rapidly modernizing and regularly conducts air and naval patrols near the island. The United States, bound by the Taiwan Relations Act and its own strategic ambiguity, pledges to help Taiwan maintain a sufficient self-defense capability and hasn't ruled out defending Taiwan of Chin attacks. Many analysts warn that if China actively invaded Taiwan, the US would very likely intervene, a clash that could spiral into a massively destructive and costly war between the two superpowers.
Meanwhile, China's claims over the South China Sea overlap those of several Southeast Asian nations. China has built artificial islands and placed missiles there, challenging international rules. The US conducts routine freedom of navigation exercises to contest China's maritime claims and to protect shipping lanes. These patrols and US support for allied coast guards are intended to deter China. However, Washington's treaty with the Philippines obliges the US to defend the Philippines if attacked means that a clash over fishing or oil in those waters could draw America into a confrontation. To counter these Chinese moves, the US has strengthened regional partnerships. For example, recent reports note that US allies Japan and Australia pledged closer military cooperation to strengthen our collective deterrence capabilities in the Indo-Pacific. They have also expanded defense technology and troop access agreements. The US is building a network of alliances in Asia, from the Quad grouping US, Japan, Australia, India to AUKUS Security Pact with UK and Australia, all aimed at deterring any Chinese aggression. Still, the situation remains unstable, and experts worrying that miscalculations say a Chinese warship bumping a US destroyer could escalate into a serious crisis. Middle East instability. Iran, Israel, proxies. The Middle East is another tinderbox. Israel's long-standing conflict with Iran and Iran's allies has intensified since the October 2023 Gaza war. In that war, Iran-backed groups Hamas, Hezbollah, Houthi rebels attacked Israel or U.S. forces, and the U.S. hit back. According to the Council on Foreign Relations, Iran's proxies launched over 200 strikes on U.S. and Israeli targets in Iraq, Syria, and Yemen in late 2023, leading the U.S. to bomb dozens of Iran-linked sites in those countries. In parallel, Hezbollah and Yemen's Houthis fired missiles and drones at Israel's North and Red Sea shipping, raising fears of regional spillover. By 2024, the conflict shifted from hidden fronts to open hostilities. In April 2024, Israeli jets bombed an Iranian consulate building in Syria, killing Iranian generals, prompting Iran to retaliate with over 300 drones and missiles, the first time Tehran directly struck Israel with such force. Later that year, Iran launched roughly 180 ballistic missiles into Israel to avenge Israeli strikes on Hamas and Hezbollah leadership. Israel then carried out its largest-ever direct strike on Iranian military sites, air defenses, and missile plants. These blows have weakened Iran's axis of resistance, but they also risk drawing all players into full-scale war.
Such exchanges have put U.S. forces on alert. U.S. officials evacuated diplomatic staff from Iraq, Kuwait, Bahrain, and the UAE and rushed naval air defenses to the region after Iran's attacks. Recognizing the threat was real, Iran analysts note there are few off-ramps in the crisis. Both Iran and Israel feel existential stakes, so escalation risks remain high. Indeed, a dramatic scenario unfolded in June 2025. The International Atomic Energy Agency, IAEA, announced Iran was violating its nuclear commitments, and Israel unilaterally bombed Iranian nuclear facilities. Iran answered by firing waves of drones and ballistic missiles at Israel. Images of interceptors lighting the night sky above Israeli cities underlined the danger. The U.S. soon directly intervened. American B-52s and fighter jets struck Iranian nuclear sites with bunker-busting bombs on June 21, 2025, in what was described as the first time a U.S. president had hit another nation's nuclear program. Iran replied by launching missiles at U.S. bases in Qatar, after which President Trump abruptly announced a ceasefire. This dramatic footage of Iranian missiles streaking across the sky, shown as they are intercepted over Ashkelon, Israel, illustrates how fast the conflict escalated. Analysts warned that if the U.S. or Israel had suffered major losses, or if Iran had been able to strike deeper inside Israel or U.S. allies, the crisis might have spun wildly out of control. For now, both sides have paused firing, but the tinder remains dry. Through all this, the U.S. has played a key role. As Israel's closest ally, the U.S. supplies most of Israel's advanced weapons and intelligence. It has also reinforced the region with air defenses and ships. On the Iranian side, the U.S. originally withdrew from the 2015 nuclear deal in 2018 under Trump and reimposed sanctions, a hardline policy that contributed to tensions. In mid-2025, the U.S. simultaneously began talking to Iran again about limits on uranium enrichment, even while supporting Israel's actions. This mixed approach has left both Tehran and Jerusalem guessing where Washington stands. The net effect is a dangerously unstable balance. Every missile and counterstrike is a test of national wills and alliances. #the United States. Military strategy and doctrine. The United States sits at the center of these flashpoints. As the world's most powerful military and leader of key alliances, American military strategy has been shaped by decades of global leadership. Its central doctrine is deterrence, to prevent war by demonstrating overwhelming power, alliances, and readiness. Global presence and alliances. U.S. maintains around 750 overseas military bases in 80 countries, ensuring rapid response across continents. NATO is the cornerstone of U.S. commitments in Europe. In Asia, bilateral treaties with Japan, South Korea, and the Philippines underpin security. These alliances expand U.S. reach and deter rivals. At the same time, the U.S. Navy's carrier strike groups patrol global sea lanes, ensuring freedom of navigation. Military power and technology. The U.S. military remains unmatched in many areas. Its defense budget in 2024 topped $850 billion, nearly triple China's and over 10 times Russia's. It fields 11 nuclear-powered aircraft carriers. China has 2, the most advanced stealth aircraft F-35, B-21 bomber, and unmatched intelligence and satellite networks. American nuclear forces. Thousands of warheads deliverable by missiles, submarines, and bombers guarantee second strike capability. Equally important, the U.S. leads in emerging technologies, hypersonic missiles, cyber warfare, artificial intelligence. In December 2024, the Pentagon unveiled its Replicator initiative to deploy thousands of autonomous drones to overwhelm Chinese or Russian systems. These capabilities make clear that while China and Russia are catching up in specific fields, the U.S. still dominates the broader military balance. Strategic doctrine, deterrence and flexible response. The United States military doctrines rest on deterrence but also flexible response. During the Cold War, mutually assured destruction prevented nuclear war by guaranteeing any nuclear strike would be met with overwhelming retaliation. Today, that doctrine still applies against Russia and China, but U.S. strategy also emphasizes conventional superiority by being able to win regional wars in Europe, Asia, Middle East without going nuclear. America aims to reassure allies and dissuade rivals. Another doctrine is forward defense, fighting enemies abroad rather than on U.S. soil. This explains why America stations troops in Poland, South Korea, or Bahrain to deter aggression there before it spreads. At the same time, U.S. strategists worry about two-front wars. If Russia escalated in Europe while China moved on Taiwan, could the U.S. fight both? Pentagon war games suggest it would be extremely difficult, but the U.S. is investing in long-range strike, logistics, and allied capabilities to prepare. Political leadership and national debate. The role of U.S. presidents and political leaders cannot be overstated. For instance, President Donald Trump in his second term starting January 2025 has taken a harder line toward Iran and China, emphasizing peace through strength and demanding NATO allies spend more on defense. He also suggested the U.S. might rethink its commitments if allies don't pay their fair share.
This has sparked debate at home. Some warn that retreating from NATO would embolden Russia, while others argue the U.S. is overstretched. In Congress, bipartisan majorities still support aid to Ukraine and strong defense budgets, but war fatigue is rising. Polls in early 2025 show many Americans worrying about getting dragged into World War III conflicts abroad. That tension between global leadership and domestic skepticism shapes U.S. policy. How far to go in defending allies, how much risk to accept in confronting rivals. Future scenarios, pathways to peace or war. Looking ahead, analysts see multiple pathways the world might take. Scenario 1. Escalation to global war. In the worst case, crises in Ukraine, Taiwan, and the Middle East emerge. Imagine Russia uses chemical weapons in Ukraine, prompting NATO intervention. China blockades Taiwan, and U.S. aircraft move to break it. Israel strikes Iranian nuclear facilities, and Iran closes the Strait of Hormuz. Each flashpoint draws in U.S. forces, each rival coordinates to stretch American power. Miscalculation leads to direct Russia-U.S. clashes in Europe, China-U.S. naval battles in the Pacific, and Iranian missiles hitting Gulf oil fields. A third world war erupts, fought with conventional and possibly nuclear arms. Scenario 2. Contained conflicts and Cold War 2.0. A more likely outcome is that conflicts simmer but do not merge. Ukraine remains a bloody stalemate, but NATO avoids direct entry. China harasses Taiwan but stops short of invasion, while the U.S. deepens military aid to Taipei. Israel and Iran trade blows but avoid a decisive showdown. The result is a new Cold War. Blocs harden with U.S., NATO, Japan, Australia facing Russia, China, Iran. Global trade fragments into rival systems, but total war is avoided. Scenario 3. Diplomacy and a new concert of powers. There is also a hopeful path. Great powers recognizing the risk of catastrophe seek compromise. A Ukraine ceasefire freezes lines while talks on European security begin. China and the U.S. agree to crisis hotlines and limits on military maneuvers around Taiwan. Israel and Gulf states engage Iran in talks, perhaps reviving aspects of the 2015 nuclear deal. In this vision, the U.S. leads not by arms alone, but by diplomacy, coalition building, and setting rules for AI weapons, cyber, and space to reduce risks. History shows such agreements are possible. Even in the Cold War, adversaries struck deals to limit nukes. Conclusion: choices for the United States and the world. The specter of world war is not inevitable, but it is real. As leaders like Poland's prime minister warned in 2024, the chance of global conflict is higher today than in decades. The United States remains the central actor. Its power, alliances, and doctrines will shape outcomes. If Washington overextends, it could spark war. If it withdraws, rivals may seize openings. The challenge is to balance strength with restraint, deterrence with diplomacy. For citizens worldwide, the stakes could not be higher. A third world war in the nuclear age would be catastrophic. Yet history also shows that wise choices, building alliances, negotiating arms control, managing rivalries, can preserve peace. The coming years will test whether the U.S. and other nations can steer away from the abyss, or whether humanity stumbles into the greatest conflict yet.